people watching on the internet, I am very short behind this thing. Okay, that's fine.
You should have seen me. Go on.
I'm more than a disembodied head, I promise. And hello, people watching on the internet. So,
Oh my God.
my message today is the blessing of sanctuary by Minister Nik Lewis. Hi. So, in typical in typical me fashion, I preach with memes. Unfortunately, it's not showing up very well on Facebook Live, so I will illustrate the meme. So we have Patrick, if you're familiar with SpongeBob, doing the "once upon a time" thing. And the caption says, "There was a young agender who didn't know what they were getting into." So this is where our story starts. I'll let you figure out who the agender is. Some of you may not know how I came to join Sanctuary. Those of you watching online most likely don't. Y'all do, but yeah.
I was there.
You were there. You are mentioned too.
I mentioned?
A few years ago, someone who used to attend here invited me. At the time, I was feeling wary of church. I had been mistreated at the church I saw myself staying at for years, and was even the worship leader of that church for over a year. Little over a year. The pastor at the time recommended a church not too far from where I used to live when I told him I was stepping down and taking a break, so I would still have somewhere to go that was spiritual. So, the meme here is, I feel a great disturbance. And this is when something that felt right began to feel wrong.
Oh no.
At first, I loved the church I was trying out, but I noticed something the more I kept going. I felt weepy whenever I went, like I wanted to cry the entire time. I didn't, but I felt this sense of sadness every time I attended. I thought I was just healing from church hurt, and the feelings stemmed from me actually tuning into my feelings whenever I went, because I don't always do that. But even when the messages at church didn't sit right with me, I'd walk home thinking about the sermon, if there was one. There wasn't always, which should have clued me in, but, you know, live and learn.
Interesting.
I would try to make sense of it theologically. Let's just say I did some mental gymnastics to try and make it make sense, or to get something usable out of it. Because my mentality at the time was, okay, it may have been mostly not helpful, but there's gotta be some truth in there, right? Right? Yeah. So, here we have the classic Drake meme, the keep going to a church you feel off about versus listening to your spiritual leaders and own discernment and booking it out of there. So, a choice had to be made. When I asked the person who introduced me to Sanctuary, as well as Apostle Leanne, so you are mentioned, they told me I was discerning something off about that church and advised me not to go back. After they checked it out for themselves, they really suggested I don't go back. Growing up, I heard some things about discernment, as I alluded to in our Solomon's Porch question, but not enough about how you can recognize something you're discerning. It was usually framed as an action on our part, not so much as something God can just reveal to us, even when we're not aware of something that's going on. So we have one of my favorite memes, you know, a person drinking tea judgmentally, and the caption is, being wary of false doctrine, like. So, figuring out what to do next. I became wary of churches then because I was worried about getting the wrong information. I mean, I didn't fully realize something was off about that church. How could I trust myself to realize what was off about another church? So, I just didn't go for a while. That was my solution. Then I was told about a Bible study apostle and the former member were starting up. I later found out that it was the beginning of a church in Charlotte. I had no idea at the time what I was getting into, nor the blessing that would come out of it. So here we have the scroll of truth meme, where it says, I can read, I majored in English, I promise. I finally found it after 15 years. The scroll of truth. And the scroll says, growing deeper in your faith involves a lot of unlearning and relearning.
Ew.
So to that you go, yeah. And before I get into that, I will read a couple passages. So we have Matthew 7:7-8. Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives. He who seeks finds. And to him who knocks the door will be open. And that's the NIV. And now to tag on with the message, because I liked how the message phrased this. Don't bargain with God. Be direct. Ask for what you need. This isn't a cat and mouse hide and seek game we're in. And yeah, no. If your child asks for bread, do you trick him with sawdust? If he asks for a fish, do you scare him with a live snake on his plate? As bad as you are, you wouldn't think of such a thing. You're at least decent to your own children. So don't think the God who conceived you in love, don't you think the God who conceived you in love will be even better?
Wow.
Yeah. So, for a few years prior to that,
Yeah.
prior to me coming here, I'd been saying that I wanted to go deeper in my faith. I tried going to different Bible studies and Christian groups and became heavily involved with the churches I was in, but I still wasn't growing as deeply in my faith as I wanted to. But it felt like the people around me didn't quite share the same goal. Well, they said they did, but their actions dictated that they were fine staying with where they were at. So maybe it took me being uncomfortable in those places to find sanctuary in sanctuary. So for this one, we have a little more in-depth me with, head empty, no thoughts, getting more thoughts, galaxy brain, and then you reach, I guess, nirvana is what that last one is supposed to be. So in order we have, I just want to go deeper in my faith. That environment really wasn't good helping me grow. Wait, it did, just in a different way. And then I finally reached the conclusion, God used all those experiences to manifest my ministry. So
Sacred geometry.
So one slide I forgot to put up here, which, my apologies, was from Matthew 20 through 22, but I'll just tell you guys what happens in that little passage. So a woman had an issue bleeding for 12 years. When Jesus was in town, she pushed through the crowd and managed to touch the hem of his garment, believing that she'd be healed if she even did that much, or that little, depending on who you ask. Jesus even felt power leave him and wondered what happened. So when Jesus saw her, he said that her faith made her whole and she was healed. So now it's time for a brief lesson in what I like to really refer to, sacred geometry.
Sacred.
So in sacred geometry, there's a principle that certain numbers, shapes, and patterns in nature can give insight into the divine, and certain numbers represent certain things. So 3 signifies manifestation. 12, for sacred geometry purposes, is 1 plus 2, which equals 3. As I said, 3 is manifestation. So her healing was manifested through her faith. This is Sanctuary's 3rd year. We've manifested the blessing of being here and being able to continue the call God has for us individually and collectively. And I've manifested the feeling of actually going deeper in my faith, despite how long it took me to get here, and to find my answer in Sanctuary. Or maybe I had the answer, I just had to go a certain path before I got here. So now we have another meme with SpongeBob holding a box, but SpongeBob is God, and the box has manifested grace and blessings in it.
They're smart.
So, more sacred geometry. Another important number, 5, which means grace in life. It was been 5 years since I left that church that I saw myself staying in for over a decade.
Wow.
Yeah. I learned more about grace, and it's enriched my life in ways I couldn't have imagined otherwise. I gained a queer platonic relationship out of my church by grace. I discovered my calling as a prophet by grace.
Ooh.
And I became ordained by grace. So God's grace covered me to this point. There were several mistakes I made along the path here, mainly trying to force something to work when it didn't. Whether it was trying to get the church I was on board with new music and how to relate better to the youth, or trying to fit myself in a church that grieved the Holy Spirit, the one I alluded to a while ago when I felt weepy. So as a prophet and an empath, I now know that that was the manifestation of God's healing toward that community through my own emotions. So, despite the long route I took to get here, I got here by grace. All this is added to my life in a way that I didn't want it, that I wanted but didn't expect. I didn't realize how much work God would have to do in me for me to get here, let alone how much work they still need to do. But by grace, I'll make it on the other side of that too. So, in conclusion, you got this. So, don't worry. If your blessing's taking a while to manifest, God hears you, God sees you, God loves you, God wants you. They'll give it to you in their timing, which is the last thing we all want to hear. I know, I don't want to hear it either. But it took a while for me to get here, so obviously some things are worth waiting for.
And what did your message make me think of? The end part, and grace will lead me home.
Oh, yeah. So next up we have Crossing the Desert to Reach the Promised Land by teacher in training Charlie Reep.
Teaching and training. Yes, well.
I mean, you do need to
Well,
be in training.
And you do
So,
train and you do teach and,
yeah.
you
That's
know,
me.
stuff.
You be doing all the stuff.
That's
You be
me.
doing stuff.
Hello, online folks. Hello, people watching.
Hi, Chuck's
At
mom.
some point. Hello.
Hi, Reeps.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Reeps.
So,
Sup, Reeps.
it's very nice that it's cold in here. It's very hot outside. But, so yeah, as you can see, my title is.
Outside is frightful.
Say what now?
I said the weather outside is frightful. And it ain't
Indeed.
because it's snowing.
No, because it's unseasonably 80 degrees and humid and all that fun stuff. So, I will be taking a completely different perspective than Nick as far as manifested blessings. So, for our third anniversary, the theme of all of our messages is manifested blessings. I feel like I'm in the middle of y'all's too, in terms of like how heavy it's gonna be and how heavy on teaching it's gonna be. So I'm sorry in advance. Not really, but kind of.
Why are you sorry? No, you're not.
I'm
Come
not
on.
sorry. Anyways, okay.
Jesus.
So, think about the last time that God blessed you. Maybe you got the job you'd always wanted, or an opportunity came up that you've been waiting for. For me, it was becoming a homeowner. Yay! Now, think about everything that led you to that blessing. Was your last job so horrible that you thought about quitting every single day? Were doors closing in your face left and right? In my case, I experienced lots of setbacks during the home buying process, and even more in the process of settling into my new home. Like the hole in my ceiling that I have now, as of Friday. But anyways.
You open the windows of heaven.
Open the windows of heaven.
The blessing may pour down. Never mind, keep going.
I was gonna say I don't want any more plumbing leaks pouring
no,
down.
not plumbing. God.
Okay.
No. Okay.
Anyway, so
Just ignore it.
the book of Exodus is the story of how God blessed the Israelites by freeing them from slavery and bringing them into the promised land. But between the first chapter and the last, the Israelites encountered setback after setback. Things like natural barriers, armies, dehydration, and starvation. God didn't cause or allow these things to happen. They were natural consequences of leaving civilization and entering a desert. Now, in chapter 14, where we're going to read from in a few minutes, the Israelites had just left Egypt and discovered they had a long journey ahead of them. Put yourself in their shoes. You're on the shores of a massive body of water, surrounded on all sides by scorching sand. Unfortunately, you don't have time to make a boat or find a way around this huge body of water, because a massive army is right behind you. Side note, all these images are from the Holman Quick Source Bible Atlas, and I will be using that as my main source. Highly recommend we use it in seminary.
Yes.
It's great. So, I don't know if you can see that, but we are reading from Exodus 14, 10 through 12. I'm reading from the Common English Bible version. As Pharaoh drew closer, the Israelites looked back and saw the Egyptians marching toward them. The Israelites were terrified and cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, weren't there enough graves in Egypt that you... I'm sorry, this is really small text. Weren't there enough graves in Egypt that you took us away to die in the desert? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt like this? Didn't we tell you the same thing in Egypt? Leave us alone. Let us work for the Egyptians. It would have been better for us to work for the Egyptians than to die in the desert. Now, it's at this point the Israelites realized it wouldn't be humanly possible to escape. Is it any wonder that they reacted the way they did? As much as we sometimes want to distance ourselves from the Israelites, we're more like them than we want to admit. Short-sighted, scared, and so very human. Now, the good news is that God didn't leave them to fend for themselves, and the same is true for us. Yep. There we go. So, if you're taking notes at home, we can learn 3 things from the book of Exodus about divine blessings and the process of receiving them. Number 1, God's blessings are a form of salvation, liberation, or hope. Number 2, we often have to navigate challenging situations in the meantime, but God is right there with us. And number 3, when we inevitably complain on the journey, guilty, God doesn't take away our blessings.
Well, that's It's the opposite of what a
Go.
lot of people
There we go. So for the first point, God's blessings are a form of salvation, liberation, or hope. So what is the promised land? Literally, it's the land of Canaan. For those of you who are in person, I don't know if y'all can see this online, but on the map over here, Canaan is this part right here. And you see how the Israelites were all the way over here? They had to cross this whole area right here, which is just wilderness. So, Canaan was a fertile region located west of the Jordan River. Figuratively, though, the phrase promised land has been associated with salvation, liberation, and hope. Now, the difference between blessings and just simply good things. No one needs salvation if their circumstances benefit them. So down here I said, who needs salvation unless they're being oppressed? I'm living for y'all's reactions right now. It's great. No one needs liberation if they have agency. And no one needs hope if they're already optimistic about the future. So for the promised land to be a blessing, you have to be dealing with difficult, even traumatic circumstances. You're welcome. I'll just let that sit with y'all for a minute.
I don't want it to.
It came from me first, if that's any consolation.
It's not.
Okay. So, this image right over here is from a 15th century woodcut called The Manna and the Quail. It's just really pretty to look at. So, the second point is God helps us navigate challenging situations. I mean, it's a woodcut.
It looks like they turn
It's
the
medieval.
temples of the. Yeah, but it looks like they turned the tents into temples, like with those towers.
It was a German, or at least I assume it was a German artist who did that in the Middle Ages.
Yeah.
But anyway, God helps us navigate challenging situations. Now, some of the setbacks that the Israel faced, the Israelites didn't reach the promised land in a few days. I showed you that massive desert that they had to cross. It took them years to get there, and problems came up as early as like 3 days into their journey.
Wow.
Yeah. So you know how water is extremely hard to come by in the desert? So the human body, I think, can go up to 3 days without water before it faces dehydration and, death. So unfortunately, the Israelites couldn't find any for a while, and especially with all of the animals that they brought, all of the people, they needed a lot of water sources. So unfortunately, when the Israelites found some, it was bitter and they couldn't drink it. But God intervened by making the water drinkable. 2 months and 15 days into their journey, the Israelites were running out of food. God intervened by making it rain bread and meat, which is where we get the manna and quail story from. And now, here's where we need to recognize that God expects us to be responsible in between, being freed from our situation and reaching the promised land. Now, about 4 months into the journey, the Israelites thought that their leader Moses had died. In reality, he'd been up on Mount Sinai for 40 days, receiving the 10 Commandments and the rest of the law from God. But rather than trusting that God hadn't abandoned them in the other previous setbacks the Israelites faced, they were just like, nah, Moses is dead, God's abandoned us. They made an idol and credited it with leading them out of Egypt. So, in comparison, that'd be like us seeing all the ways God has blessed us, and in a moment of doubt saying, I did this all by myself. Yeah. What I also want us to recognize is that God doesn't punish us for complaining about how challenging our circumstances are. Anyways. Let's see. So, God doesn't take away our blessings when we complain. So I know many of us were taught that it's not okay to complain to God, that even if we're struggling, we're blessed and highly favored. I saw those eye rolls, yes. So reading Exodus is really
my message too.
Yeah, reading Exodus is really a culture shock for a lot of us then, because the Israelites complain about literally everything. So remember that passage we read earlier? Yeah, that was just after they fled Egypt and were about to cross the Red Sea. Or Reed Sea, depending on your translation. And I'm going to go into a rabbit hole because I found this fascinating. We don't really know where the Israelites crossed. We don't even know if they crossed the Red Sea or the Reed Sea. because the original Hebrew phrase, and I really hope I don't butcher this, is Yam Suf, has been translated as Red Sea and the Reed Sea. If you actually go to Bible Gateway and you look in Exodus and you compare different translations from a lot of books, they will actually list Red Sea in about half of them and Reed Sea or Sea of Reeds in the other half. It's very interesting. But I went down a total rabbit hole the other night looking into this because I had no idea that this part of Exodus was an archaeological mystery to this day. So, like I recommended, the Holman Quick Source Bible Atlas, it actually goes into a little bit about this. And so I actually pulled this map from the route of Exodus that it's a 2-page spread, but I really just want us to focus on the locations of potential crossings of the Red Sea or Reed Sea or whatever it is. Let's see if the thingies will work. Yes. Okay, the transitions are working. So, possible stop. Anyways. Anyway, possible locations of the crossing of the Red Sea. Unfortunately, y'all can't see it, but there's like a point up here. It's about, I don't know, a few miles south of the Mediterranean Sea at Lake Bala, which was drained to build the Suez Canal. So even if you wanted to go see it, you can't go see it anymore, which is really sad. I know, but I found it interesting that all of these possible like Red Sea crossings are all along the Suez Canal. So it's like, there's water there anyways, I guess. Let's see if this will also work. Another transition's working, yes. Okay, so there's actually 2 locations here. One of them's at Lake Tinsa, located near you can't see it, but there's like a city called Ismailia there. It's located about halfway between the Mediterranean Sea up north and the Gulf of Suez to the south. And during the times of the pharaohs, the Red Sea was apparently, or the lake was apparently connected to this gulf. So like the geographic and, the landscape of the Holy Land has changed so much since the writings of the Old Testament. Oh, third location right here is called the Great Bitter Lake. Where'd it go? Yeah, again, also part of the Suez Canal. Go. Transition. Come on. There we go. Technology. And now the last possible location is down here at the Gulf of Suez, which is like the northwestern arm of the Red Sea. So the Red Sea has like this, and then it kind of goes like that. So the Gulf of Suez is like that. Anyway, I just thought that was really interesting, so I wanted to share that with you. There we go. And now back to our originally scheduled message. God doesn't take away our blessings when we complain. Anyway, so notice on day 3, when they ran out of water, the Israelites complained about it. God didn't say, that's it, I'm turning this caravan around. God told the Israelites to be obedient, and they would avoid the diseases that the Egyptians suffered. Which makes me think that the regulations God mentioned were more so for sanitary reasons rather than like morals, as we've often assumed, but I digress. That's a topic for another day. So again, on day 3, when the Israelites are, about to dehydrate and die, God leads them to an oasis with 12 springs of water. And remember, 1 and 2, 3, manifestation. Sacred geometry. So, 2 months and 15 days in, when the Israelites were complaining about starving, the Bible says God heard their complaints and sent them meat at night and bread in the morning. Now, the Israelites also complained about, 3 months in, of not having water again. And God says, I'll be standing there in front of you on the rock at Horeb. God once again provided water for them, this time out of the rock. Next. Okay. Oh, why is the text so small? My goodness. So, what I also want to ask is complaining, is that merely expressing frustration or doubting God's faithfulness? So complaining about, starving and dying of thirst seems pretty natural. But I think we overlook the fact that the Israelites complaining was evidence that they didn't trust God to meet their needs. So notice they kept complaining like literally 3 days into their journey. That makes sense. But again, God had literally parted the sea for them, had them walk across, and they were doubting that he could provide water for them. And then, they did it again and again and again, which makes me think that, okay, it was more of an issue of a lack of trust rather than anything else. Like I said, it took them forever to learn that God would meet their needs too, considering they created their own God when Moses was on that mountain for a month. I was like, okay. So unless we turn to idolatry, God doesn't punish us for lack of trust. He could have punished them, 3 days in and was like, oh, you don't trust me to meet your needs even though I parted the sea for you. Okay, that's fine. No, it's only when we decide that we know best or that we're the masters of our fate that God says, all right, that's enough. So I think, if anything, voicing our doubts to God is something that we should do when we're overwhelmed by our circumstances. It allows us to be honest. And isn't honesty necessary for a healthy relationship? Yeah. So unlike what many of us have been told in church, God isn't going to take away our blessings because we've had a shred of doubt. It's human nature. And as we've seen with the Israelites, it's human nature as we've seen with the Israelites. If anything, the Israelites are a good case study on what it means to be human and to follow this almighty, omnipresent God. We just need to be careful about letting those doubts consume us and drive us to idolatry. So yeah, that's it. Any questions?
How did you figure out the 3 days in thing?
It's mentioned in.
It's mentioned. I never
Yeah.
picked up on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean I hadn't either until I was like reading over and over and over, and so it's pretty fascinating stuff. So like there's times mentioned for the most part, all the times that they've complained, and I was like, yeah. Looks like that's the end of the presentation, so I will go back to the pretty slides. Nope. Hello? There we go. You're up, Mom.
I'm up. Okay. I was comfortable too.
I know, this is a very
I
comfortable
know, and
couch.
it's the couch. So, I guess I'll be the dark one in the bunch.
I like how we started off as like very, but it covers the whole spectrum of us. It covers the spectrum of human emotions.
It does, and it covers kind of where we're at and the different things that we've been dealing with over
Literally the past week.
So my message is from Isaiah.
Ooh, very, very happy-go-lucky passage there.
Okay. If I can find it, because this isn't my usual Bible, I thought it was a riot that when we decided we were going to do this, none of us used the NIV. I believe it's Isaiah 47, and I'm reading in verse 1, and